Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Kilayim, Chapter 4, Halacha 3 in the Art Scroll 40a1. Today we're getting into a very straightforward mission and a very straightforward Gemara. It's going to give the definition for a vineyard by the number of vines, how they're organized, and then we're going to get into, hey, what happens next? What happens if you actually are planting forbidden species within the 4 amos of one of the vines? The back and forth is going to go back and forth between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, and the sugyas are going to give a few cases that are going to present the opinion of Bet Shammai and the opinion of Bet Hillel. In doing so, the Gemara is going to teach you to deepen your thinking about how nullification is going to come. The Mishnah starts off and it says if one plants a single row of 5 vines, Bet Shammai says it is considered a vineyard. So that is going to have the halachic status of a vineyard. Remember earlier in chapter 4, if you have fewer than 5 vines, it will be considered just a couple of vines, and it will be, for separations, just 6 tefachim between, say, like if you have 1 vine or 4 vines. But once you have this magical 5th vine, bingo, it turns onto the vineyard, and the setback becomes a 4 amos separation, and all of the strictnesses are going to come. So the opinion of Bet Shammai, to recap, is going to be 5 vines in a row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all lined up. Bet Hillel says it is not considered a vineyard unless there are 5 vines, but in 2 rows. Now, that means that you're going to have a row of 2 and a row of 3. Now, the one that sticks out is going to be called a tail, and that's going to be very important for the later case that's coming up at the end of the sugya, and the end of this Gemara. So you have 2 and 3, and that is going to be considered a vineyard. Now, there's going to be another part of this dispute. And by the way, both are agreeing you have to at least have 5 vines. The next part of the Mishnah says, therefore, if someone plants foreign seed within the 4 amma work area of a vineyard, and it remains there long enough to forbid the produce of the adjoining vines as Kilayim, how long is that going to be? That's going to be where it's going to grow 1/200th from its previous growth. So that might only take a day for some species. Some species, it might take less than a day. Some species, it's going to be a little bit more. But the point is, it doesn't take very long to reach 1/200th of the previous growth. Why is it going to be 1/200th, where it becomes prohibited for benefit as Kilayim? Well, there's a thing about what's going to be for Kilayim. That's a prohibition of a mixture of 1 in 200. So what this is saying is part of the plant now grew 1/200th, so you have 1/99 or 199 out of 200 that is going to be okay because it's what you had, and this extra little bit that's going to be new is going to be considered a mixture within itself, and that is going to nullify it. Now, the idea is that if you have these sorts of nullifications, you have limits on if you can bring the omer from the crop. You also have limits for the wine. You can't bring any of this wine to the temple. You also are limited in other things that you can do in the service of the temple if you're going to get some of these Kilayim things with the Kilayim and the vineyards. So Kilayim makes it so that you really just can't use this stuff for any benefit, and certainly you can't use it in the temple either. So it says, therefore, if somebody plants foreign seed within the 4 amma work area of the vineyard and it remains there long enough to forbid the produce of the adjoining vines as Kilayim, Bet Shammai says he has rendered 1 row of the vineyard forbidden. In other words, that's going to be 5 vines. And Bet Hillel says he's rendered 2 rows forbidden. Why is it 2 rows? Well, he's defining it as 2 and 3. So the idea is that you have this 4 amma gap, a work area. It has to be left to be barren. What happens if somebody comes within here and now plants foreign species, let's say some barley? Well, the idea is that along this row, you're going to render 5 vines to be forbidden. Even if one of this is going to be, say, in the middle or something like that, you're going to render on the other sides to be forbidden. And you're also going to, according to Bet Hillel, render part of the second row to be forbidden as well. So very important to make sure that you have the proper work areas when you're doing your setbacks for vineyards. Now you might think that, well, maybe a setback for a vineyard doesn't mean very much, but at some point if you have a vineyard, you're going to want to plant something else, or somebody else is going to want to plant something on the other side of that. Or they may want to. And it is possible, it's a maloket tanaim, but it is possible, according to the Halacha, that somebody can make somebody else's property forbidden. That's going to be a maloket where Shimon Bar Yochai says they can't do that, but the prevailing opinion is that somebody can. So if I have a vineyard and you, as my neighbor, plant within 4 amma of the border of our area and there's no fence there, well, you can nullify some of my vines. And by the way, some of your grain will be nullified as well. We're going to go into these cases now. And the Mishnah is basically teaching that if you have foreign seed planting alongside a vineyard within the work area, that's why you have to keep your work areas clean. Bet Shammai is going to be prohibiting 1 row of vines, and Bet Hillel prohibits 2 rows, 1 extra row deep, because his definition of what is a vineyard is going to be by 2 rows. So if you have this foreign planting and it's done along the entire length of the vineyard, Bet Shammai would prohibit an entire row, and Bet Hillel would prohibit 2 rows, regardless, by the way, of how many vines these rows will contain. Now, if the foreign seed is planted in only one spot, then only a part of the first row, according to Bet Shammai, or the first 2 rows, according to Bet Hillel, will become prohibited. So the Gemara is going to talk about cases where seed is planted in different locations alongside a vineyard in spots, and proceeds to clarify which of the vines become prohibited in each of the cases, and again, both by Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel's formulation. The first case is going to go like this. It says, if someone planted foreign seed in one spot within the vineyard's 4 amma work area, again, that's what's going to trigger the violation. It goes into this empty spot, 4 ammas, that's going to be for the separating area, and it faces the middle vine of the front row. So you have a vineyard and the vines are going to be 5 wide, and now this one little patch of, say, barley you're planting there within 4 amos is going to be, or whatever foreign seed is going to be there, and it's in the middle vine. In other words, it's in the third of the 5th vine. So the Gemara says, according to the opinion of Bet Shammai, that straight row of 5 vines is legally considered a vineyard, and therefore the foreign seed prohibits the entire first row of 5 vines. In other words, what this is saying is this Gemara is referring to a vineyard containing 5 rows in each row, and the seed is going to be planted in the middle, just across from the 3rd vine in this row of 5. Bet Shammai, since he's considering a single row of 5 vines to be a legal vineyard, then that means that the first row of vines is the nearest vineyard, and that means that this seed is rendering that first row prohibited. Why is all this needed? Well, somebody might have come along and thought, well, maybe you're going to forbid maybe, 3, 4, 5 rows down. Maybe you're going to end up, forbidding, say 25 vines instead of just 5 vines. So what this is trying to do is just trying to limit the contamination to what is immediate to it. In other words, the whole vineyard doesn't become forbidden, just what is next to it. That is what it's trying to show. And by the way, Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai will agree on it. But again, it's based on the definition of what is a vineyard, both according to Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. Now, the Gemara goes to the next part of the case, and it says, according to the opinion of Bet Hillel, that a vineyard must be arranged in 2 parallel rows. The foreign seed will prohibit the middle 3 vines in the first row and the facing 3 vines in the second row. So what's going to happen over there? Basically like this. You have the 3 vines in the first row are going to be the closest to this foreign seed, and then the 3 vines directly behind them are also going to be prohibited. Now, the reason, says the Marafulda, that 6 vines are going to be prohibited is going to be like this. While Bet Hillel agrees that the minimum vineyard consists of 5 vines, they hold that it has to be 2 vines facing 2 vines, and 1 vine protrudes as a tail. And basically, you have to figure out, well, which part is the tail. Maybe you're going to define the vineyard as 2 and 3 instead of 3 and 2. So let's say the foreign seed is closest to you. Well, you could say that the first 2 vines are going to be the ones that are there, and maybe the last 3 ones are going to be the one that has the tail. Or vice versa, you could say that perhaps the tail is the one that is closest. So the idea is that the vine nearest the seed and the one directly behind it is going to constitute the middle section of the vineyard. And since in each row no vine is closer to the seed than these, the remainder of the vineyard can consist of either 2 vines facing on the right or 1 vine on the tail being the left. In other words, the question is, where is the tail going to be? And because you could organize it and say that perhaps the tail is over there, or perhaps the tail is over here, or perhaps this extra 5th vine is closest to you on your left, or maybe it's the closest to you on your right. Because there is uncertainty, it is going to prohibit 6 vines. And the Chazan Ish says about this in his Kilayim Sefer 10:16. He says the result is that 6 vines that are included in the 2 possible nearest vineyard configurations are prohibited. In other words, there are different ways to construct this 2 versus 2 with a tail, and basically because of that, the Chazan Ish is pointing out that 6 vines are going to qualify as the components of the nearest vineyard, and because there's a suffix on which one is the tail. And so because if you would say that the one behind it, the 6th one, in the second row behind it, shouldn't be the tail, it should be over here, another guy can come along and say, no, that really is the tail, and this one isn't. So because there's suffix, you have to include that 6th vine. So the next case is going to go like this, and the logic is going to be the same. The second case goes like this. If someone planted foreign seed facing one of the intervals between the middle vine and the vines on either side of it, according to the opinion of Bet Shammai that a straight row of 5 vines is legally considered a vineyard, then the foreign seed clearly prohibits 2 vines in the front row on this side of the foreign seed and 2 vines in the front row on that side of the foreign seed, since these are surely part of the vineyard. And that should become prohibited. Which one is it? Is it the one that is to the right of these 4, or to the left of it, or none of these? So there's a suffix here. In other words, you have a row of 6. In the last case, it was an odd number of vines because you need to have 5. Here it's going to be an even number. There are 6. But over here, you have the foreign species planted in the gap between vine number 3 and vine number 4. That's going to be the case for both Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. So as we're talking about, you have several vines that can qualify as the 5th one. And Rabbi Kanievsky says about this that it could be the one on the very far left of the row, or it could be on the far right. And is it possible that there would be only 4 vines that are prohibited, or maybe you could say that there's no 5th vine? That, by the way, is going to be how they're going to explain it. So the question is going to be, if foreign seed is not planted directly opposite the midpoint of the space between the vines, but it's going to be off-center, in other words, it's in this gap, then what's going to happen is that, it is closer to one of these vines than to the other. And the thing is that, these 5 vines are going to constitute a vineyard, and it's going to be closest to the foreign seed, so they're going to be prohibited. But which ones is it going to be? That's where we're going. So the Gemara says that we say as follows: that if the foreign seed were closer to one of the two flanking vines than the other, then these, a total of 5 vines, are prohibited. And the vine that's closest to the foreign seed is considered the middle of the vineyard, and 2 vines to the right and 2 vines to the left are going to be prohibited for a total of 5 vines. But if the foreign seed is not closer to one of the flanking vines than the other, in other words, it's directly opposite the midpoint in this gap between the vines, then the Gemara says that both of the vines that might have been considered the 5th are permitted. So only the 4 closest to the seed, in other words, 2 on the right, 2 on the left, are going to be prohibited according to the Rosh. So that is going to be a big chiddush about it, and the proceeding is going to represent a law according to Bet Shammai, who holds that only vines in the front row are prohibited. Now, the Gemara is going to continue, and it looks like perhaps Bet Hillel might actually be more strict about this. So, according to the opinion of Bet Hillel, that the minimal size vineyard must be arranged in 2 parallel rows, and it has to have a tail. The foreign seed prohibits 4 vines in the front row, facing 2 vines in the row behind it. So the case is very straightforward. You're going to have a tail, and the tail is going to be either the leftmost vine or the rightmost vine. But the problem is you don't know which one is the tail. And so what's going to happen, instead of just prohibiting 4 vines, like what Bet Shammai is saying, Bet Hillel is saying, no, you're prohibiting 6 vines. Now, let me recap this, okay? If you have a case, like in the first part of this, second case here that the Gemara is talking about, where the vine is in the middle of this gap between vine number 3 and vine number 4, but it's a little bit closer to vine number 3 than vine number 4. It's not the midpoint. Then you can draw a line and you can say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, according to Bet Shammai. No problem. But in the case of the midpoint, it's exactly in the midpoint, Bet Shammai is actually going to be lenient about it. He's going to say that it's going to be 2 on the left of it and 2 on the right of it. And he's not going to make you draw this extra vine in as a suffix and say, well, perhaps it could be the 5th vine all the way on the end. And so you still have 5, and you still have 5 over there. So, he could actually force you to get up to 6, but he's not. He's limiting it down to 4. And that is going to be a leniency. But according to Bet Hillel, because a minimal vineyard has to have a tail, the question is that where do you draw the tail? You have it again in the middle. You have it in the midpoint. You have to have, 2 in the second row. Fine. And you have to have 3 in the first row. But which of the vines is going to be prohibited as the tail? Is it going to be the one that's most on the left or the one that's most on the right? And he's saying because you don't know, you have to include both of them. We're going to get into the next case. So the next case is going to be like this. If someone planted foreign seed facing the corner vine of the vineyard, so let's say you have 5 vines in a row, and you have 25 vines that are there. There's 5 in a row, 5 by 5, okay? 25 vines. Now, somebody plants the foreign seed in the corner of this box of vineyard, okay? What is going to be forbidden? So the Gemara says like this: if someone planted foreign seed facing the corner vine of the vineyard, for example, facing the vine in the southeastern corner, according to the opinion of Bet Shammai, that a minimal vineyard consists of a straight row of 5 vines, which 5 vine row is prohibited? Is it going to be the south row or the east row? And the answer is both this one and that one are prohibited. So how many vines are you going to be disqualifying according to Bet Hillel or Bet Shammai? You're going to be disqualifying 9 vines. The one right next to the row is going to be disqualified, and then either the southmost row or the northmost row is going to be disqualified as well. That is going to make 5 vines by 5 vines, total of 9 vines. The Gemara is going to continue, and now we're actually going to be seeing a leniency according to Bet Hillel, according to how he's going to be drawing where his tail is, and he's actually going to be saying that there are 6 vines that are disqualified. Gemara continues and says, according to the opinion of Bet Hillel, that a minimum vineyard consists of 2 parallel rows, and you also have to have the tail. The Gemara says the foreign seed prohibits the first 2 vines and the facing 2 vines in the corner, and additionally 1 vine protruding as the tail on this side, the southern row, and 1 vine protruding as a tail on the eastern row. So because you have to have a tail, what is it going to be? It is going to be 3 down on the left and 3 up on the north, and you have to have a tail. So perhaps the tail is going to be the 2 that are going to be just above it, or it's going to be the 2 that are going to be to the left of it. In other words, what it's saying is you're disqualifying 3 on the north and 3 on the south and 1 in the second row for a total of 6, because there are 2 ways of doing the geometry to draw the tail. So the last case is going to go like this. If someone planted foreign seed facing one of the intervals between the corner vine and the vines on either side of it. So in the last case, he planted in the middle. In the middle, that's going to be right at the edge of the corner of this square of vines or rectangle of vines. And now it's not at the corner. It's going to be between the corner vine and the vine on the side of the row. So let's say he either does it on the southmost side or the eastmost side. So it's going to be like this. According to the opinion of Bet Shammai, that a vineyard consists of 5 vines in a row, the foreign seed prohibits the entire 5-vine row of the side that the vineyard faces. So if he is going to be on the easternmost side and it's not at the corner, it's just a little bit north of the corner, and it's between this row of vines going up and down, and it's between there, it's between the 4th and 5th vine down there, then it's going to disqualify that entire row of 5 vines. And if it's on the southmost side between the leftmost side of this row of vines, and it's between vine number 4 and 5, and again, it's going to disqualify that southernmost row. Now, in the last case, you're not really sure. It's in the middle, so it's going to disqualify 9 vines. Over here, it's just going to disqualify 5 vines. The Gemara continues, and we're finishing up now, and it says, according to the opinion of Bet Hillel, that a vineyard consists of 2 parallel rows of 2 vines each with a tail, total of 5 vines as well. The Gemara says the foreign seed certainly prohibits the first 2 vines and the facing 2 vines in the corner, and the 1 vine protruding as a tail on the side, and the side facing the foreign seed. So what is that trying to describe? That's saying that assuming the seed was planted in the eastern work area, and now on the eastern side between the corner vine and this 4th vine, you planted the foreign species there. What it's trying to say is you're going to disqualify the 5 vines, the 3 vines there, right? 3 on the side of the row, that's going to go up and down, and 2 on the side. But another way to look at it could also be, well, wait a second. Perhaps you're also disqualifying the vines to the left-right side, and also 2 vines there. And also, you could say that perhaps it's not these 2 vines, it's those 2 vines. So you're going to end up disqualifying a total of 7 vines based on the geometry, because again, you're not sure which row has the tail. It could be like what we were talking about before. You're not sure which case has the tail. And also, you're not sure which are the 2 vines. So it's going to disqualify out of this block of 25, a total of 7 vines will be disqualified according to Bet Hillel. So the Gemara continues and says, but which is the 6th vine that's prohibited? And it says it's either the third vine in the first row or the second vine in the third row. In other words, because of the uncertainty of which is going to be the sixth vine, you have two possible cases. That is how you're getting to 7 vines. It's going to disqualify 6 vines, but you don't know where the 6 ones are. You don't know where the row is, either for the second row or for the first row. So the Gemara is calling the southern row, let's say, the eastern row on the first row, and that's going to be either easternmost vine in each row. And then what it's trying to say is the reason that, according to the Marafulda, that the Bet Hillel is going to be prohibiting a 6th vine seems like this. It says we learned that if foreign seed is planted directly facing the corner vine, it's going to prohibit 6 vines. But likewise, we also learned that if it's planted directly facing any of the other vines in a row, such as the second vine, it's going to prohibit 6 vines. And since if the seed would be planted directly opposite the vine to the right or the left, that's going to prohibit 6 vines, but we don't know which of these 6 vines it is, and that is how you're adding up to 7. So basically what this is going to end up is that because of the uncertainty of which of the 3 and 2 it's going to be, because you could say perhaps it's 3 and 2 going left and right, or you could say it's perhaps 3 and 2 going up and down, and perhaps the 2 is over here, or perhaps the 2 is over here. That is going to be how you're going to end up disqualifying 7 vines. Well, what is all of this leading into? Well, first of all, we're going to be getting into other kinds of 5 vineyards in Halacha 4, and we're trying to figure out the arrangements of what happens if something gets disqualified. And, that's also important for the earlier parts, what's going to be a boundary and things like that. So all of this is trying to deepen your awareness of the work areas, deepen your awareness of the strictness of Kilayim Hakarim, and also trying to sharpen your mind on these little geometry puzzles. Anyway, have a great day.